And joining us now, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming by.
A couple of days on the job. That's a hostile room in there that you're working in.
It's interesting. You got to be ready to get in there.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the relationship with the media and the Trump administration.
Right.
There's a lot of people in that room that we now know through WikiLeaks that colluded with Hillary Clinton's campaign and helped Hillary Clinton's campaign.
I don't think that's any shocker. I think the media, by and large, if you look at surveys over the years, has never been conservative-leaning by any measure. But the fact of the matter is that that's not a surprise, and I think we can either continue to complain about it or we continue to do what we can to get the facts out and get our message out. I think that there's a difference between complaining, though, and calling it out. And when they're not being accurate or when they're misleading or there's a narrative, then I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're out there explaining our side and why we believe something or the facts that we're using to make our case.
You were very passionate this weekend over what was a fake news story,
right.
The term everybody seems to be using now, that Martin Luther King's bust that was in the Oval Office that had been removed. I was just in there. I saw that, in fact, that bust still exists.
It does. Well, I think that there is this, what I get frustrated with is this double standard and rush to click instead of get it right. Look, we all make mistakes. I make them all the time. And I think that what has happened is that there's this predisposition in the media to, especially with this president, to assume he can't do certain things. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to file. He couldn't win a primary. He wasn't going to get out of the field. That he couldn't win Michigan. He wouldn't win Iowa. Why is he wasting his Pennsylvania? Then he didn't win this, and this vote was going to happen, and now the nominees aren't going to get through. In every case, he's defied the odds and won. And I think the interesting thing is, at some point, the disposition should be, he's going to do it unless we can prove otherwise. He has shown through every step of the way that he's going to win. And so it just seems to me, it's odd that if those are the odds, if you're looking at his track record, the track record is a proven track record of success in winning. And yet the media's default is on every scenario, whether it's his nominees getting through or him winning a primary or him accomplishing something, it's immediately a negative and a failure.
We learned a lot from WikiLeaks. It was very interesting. A couple of people that hosted moderated debates, John Harwood of CNBC, Martha Raddatz. Martha Raddatz was crying the night when it was announced that Donald Trump was the president, but yet she ended up moderating a presidential debate. John Harwood, we learned a number of things about him through WikiLeaks, and I'm thinking, how did they get to that position if they're that one-sided? Are they going to let me moderate a debate?
I hope so.
In the future? I hope so, too. I'm all for it.
I'm for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting. I think for as much heat sometimes as Fox News takes in particular, you look at an outlet like MSNBC, which is by no means, I mean, they are far to the left. And yet, over and over again, they are treated by their colleagues as being a mainstream news source. And I think that goes for other writers as well. Yeah. Look, as I said, if you're on the conservative side, this is nothing new. This is a battle that we fight every day. The lucky thing for us is that through the beauty of talk radio and a lot of new sites that are popping up day in and day out, whether it's Breitbart, the Daily Caller, the Daily Signal, over and over again, we're seeing people gravitate towards sites because they recognize that the mainstream media isn't the only game in town anymore.
It's such an important issue, and none of these mainstream media outlets defended me any times that Obama mentioned me by name or attacked the Fox News Channel or attacked talk radio. Maybe I'm misreading something here, but I watched your first full-day press conference, and there was a certain protocol that existed prior to you being here, which is the AP would get the first question, the networks would get the second question, the AP, whoever the lead AP person is, like Helen Thomas during President Reagan's term, would stand up and say it's over. You did things very differently, by design?
Yes.
Tell
I think that I think part of this is to make sure that we understand that we have to have a healthy relationship. But I think that there is a desire to bring new voices in. I think the New York Post represents something.
That was the first question.
The first question. It's the president's hometown paper.
It happens to be my favorite paper.
There you go. Right. It's great. But the second question went to the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN. They have a huge audience.
They have a magnificent audience. Mm-hmm. But it's not just their audience that matters.
Then you went to Univision, if I'm not...
I did. And then I went to American Urban Radio.
Right.
And I think the point is that there are voices and issues that the mainstream media sometimes doesn't capture. Mm-hmm. And it's important for those issues to get as much prominence as some of the mainstream ones. Now, that's not saying that maybe tomorrow I call on the AP first, maybe I call on NBC at some point, whatever, I'm going to call on Fox first. But the idea is that different outlets who have different audiences and different issues should have an opportunity to get those issues up front. Maybe by hearing from the Christian Broadcasting Network, we hear about an issue that otherwise would get drowned out. That helps set the tone for the briefing and brings up an issue to more prominence that otherwise might not have gotten the attention it deserves.
You had an opportunity to get out of the room faster.
Right.
Because the lead person for the AP stood up and said,
well, they sat, but yeah, they said thank you very much,
which
is truly the signal, and I indicated that I was going to keep going. But I think it's important. I wanted to also let the press know that there's nothing we were afraid of. We wanted to be answer all the questions we could. I think I stayed for 90 minutes. If you saw how packed that room is, it was the media. It was the press secretary equivalent of a Donald Trump rally. It's a packed room. Mm-hmm. And part of it was that we wanted to take questions as long as we could within reason. Mm-hmm. But I think they were getting a little tired too and hot.
If someone questions my honesty and integrity, I think I'd get a little hot under the collar. But I'm kind of loud because I'm a radio host and an opinion host on Fox. Jonathan Karl, well, are you going to be honest with us? Isn't that another way of saying, are you going to lie to us?
Right.
And there's a certain insulting quality, I believe, to the question.
Look, and this goes back to something I said earlier, Sean.
Yeah.
We all make mistakes, right? And so one of the questioners in the room during that first press conference said, when are you going to submit your nominees to the Supreme Court? And I joked. I said, so do we get more than one? Mm-hmm. Because as I recall, there's only one vacancy. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think they didn't know the facts, but I could have capitalized on their mistake. But I didn't. And I think that there's this two-way street that doesn't always exist in the
Wouldn't that be a case with Kellyanne when Kellyanne said, well, we have an alternative set of facts?
Right, and the alternative set of facts is, and what she meant by that is this, that we reached out to one group of folks to ask for ridership, and there was another group that did it. And again, we weren't by any means trying to mislead anyone. We asked for a set of facts. We thought that the facts that were going in the time that we were given to respond, or the time we wanted to make sure that we responded in that news cycle, were accurate. But there are times, like anything else, it's not alternative facts. It's that there's sometimes you can watch two different stations and get two different weather reports. That doesn't mean that the station was lying to you.
Well, I've known Kellyanne for 20 years. Right. I took that to be, well, we have a different perspective than you do.
Right, and you can look at, the press was trying to make that seem like that we were ignoring the facts. When the facts are, sometimes when you look at a situation, in the same way that you can look at a weather report, and one weather report comes out and says it's going to be and the next one says there's going to be light rain. No one lied to you. It just means you interpreted the data in a way that you felt got you to a conclusion. And I think this idea that we're immediately lying but let's take the audience. We were right. If you add up the number of people who watched that online, on Twitter Live, Facebook Live, on YouTube, it broke all sorts of records. I'm willing to put out facts. Even CNN got 16.9 million people watching it online. Wow. And yet, you combine that with what Fox did online, how many people streamed it, how many people watched, 31 people watched it online, watched it on the broadcast networks. Combine all that. Where are their facts? Because I got called a liar for something that I can add up and say, here's how we come up with this number. And yet, where's the number that disproves that I'm wrong? In fact, the default was, again, this gets back to something I was saying earlier, the default was, you're lying. Whereas I was willing to put numbers out there to back up how I got to it. Okay, and in the case of the transportation part, yeah, I was wrong. I wasn't wrong, but I used a set of numbers that the Metro Authority came out with.
It's like measuring audiences now for radio and TV. There's all sorts of devices.